You are listening to Your Money Story. I am Dawn Thomas, a mother of three, financial advisor by day, and a PhD candidate researching superannuation engagement. The information discussed in this podcast does not take into account your personal financial objectives and situation. Before acting on any information discussed here, you should consider its appropriateness, having regard to your objectives, needs, and financial situation. Today we have Lacey Filipich, and it is a dynamite episode. Lacey does not mince her words about her thoughts on the corporate hoodwinking on International Women's Day events and who she thinks should really be fixing gender inequity. Listeners, there will be strong language in this episode. Lacey Filipich founded Money School in 2010 to build financial capability in adults and Makers Kids Club in 2017 to teach children money skills. She published her book Money School in 2020, is a TEDx speaker, and the winner of the 2019 Business News 40 Under 40 Award. Welcome on the show, Lacey.
Thanks for having me, Dawn. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. So we organized this episode because of a post you did on social media, and it was linked to an article that you wrote for Women's Agenda. You can actually say what you feel about it, and you don't sugarcoat any of it. And sometimes we kind of tiptoe around topics or not even talk about them at all because they're uncomfortable. So that's why I have you on here. So for our listeners, Lacey's not going to mince her words for the next 30 minutes. She's just going to tell it how it is. And I think that's refreshing to hear as well, because we are going to see a whole onslaught of corporatized International Women's Day events.
Well, it's an interesting one for me.
Yeah.
And over the last few decades, and it is a few decades, because I've been aware of International Women's Day since I was in primary school. Mm-hmm. And I used to sort of go, do we really need this anymore? Like, aren't we there yet? You know, I had a feminist aunt. I have a feminist aunt, very staunch feminist aunt. And I used to feel a bit uncomfortable around International Women's Day because she got really vocal, and I'd be like, oh, come on. Like, we're equal, you know, my male friends at school and I, what do you mean? But every year I find myself getting angrier and angrier in the lead up to International Women's Day for the hypocrisy. It's really the hypocrisy. And the point you made about different people can do different things in this circumstance. The reason why I guess I'm getting more vocal about it is the personal risk to me of being vocal is lower and lower as years go by.
Yes.
I have the advantage of I don't have a boss. I'm my own boss. So no one's going to fire me. No one's going to, say, oh, she's a bit awkward, I don't want her around. Yes. Or like just go, oh, don't promote her. I don't have that problem. I don't have clients who are going to leave. They like that I'm vocal about it. So it's a unique position. And I think the fact that I've been allowed to express it more and more makes a difference and makes me more vocal. But when I first learned about International Women's Day, I was taught about the suffragettes. Mm-hmm. The horrible treatment they went through to be able to get the vote, women starving themselves and being force-fed and locked in jail like in the 1800s. And it was so vivid in my mind about all the sacrifices these women had made to make progress. And then a couple of years ago, I got my mum to read The Wife Drought because she was saying to me, why are you all still complaining? I don't get this. And I got her to read The Wife Drought. And after she was like, oh my God, it's worse than it was for me in the 80s. She thought we had gone backwards.
Wow.
So in the 80s, she was working school hours and getting paid a proper salary so that she could, pick up the kids and take us to school and everything because she was a single mum. And she had a boss who thought that was just perfectly normal. And there are women today who can't access that. And she hadn't realized. She was like, wow, it's really that bad. And I was like, yeah, I know. So every year I see International Women's Day as this one-hit wonder where everybody flies their virtue signaling flags. Oh, I'm so good. Oh, yes, we've got so much work to do, I know. But look at how far we've come and fight the good fight. And it's just total bullshit from most of them. And it really, really upsets me these days because none of them do the hard things and the big things that they could do. They just like to talk about it and have a nice breakfast together. So, yeah, don't I sound cynical? It's getting worse. It's getting worse. The year goes by.
I think it's valid. I was expressing to you when we communicated about doing this episode that I feel, especially as a brown woman in Australia, being an immigrant, I can't be as outspoken as I want to be about how certain women issues are treated. Like I have to navigate it my own way, because there's a good chance at some point, I could be told to go back to where I come from. So
and you know what? We've got form for that. That is a totally justified. Like I think about Yasmin Abdel-Magid, who I know personally because we went to university together. We were on a committee together a few years ago.
Yeah.
Look at how badly she got treated for being vocal. If I had said the same things as her, I don't think it would have been as bad. I think it's a totally justified, and we've got form concern. I agree with you. Yeah.
So that's why I really appreciate you coming on here to talk about this, because I think you're going to articulate a lot of things that maybe some women feel, but it's an awkward conversation to have. It's also quite confusing because you can be caught in this wave of change. Like sometimes I find International Women's Day events quite euphoric because I kind of believe for an hour. I'm like, oh, they care. They really care. We're going to change things. Like I get caught up in it. I believe, like I'm a believer, and I go, it's going to be better. It's going to be better. And then you walk out of the event, and then sometimes I've gone out of an International Women's event and gone to a fund managers event basically in the same day. And I realized, no, nothing is going to change rapidly. So let's put it this way. You've got the corporatized version of International Women's Day. What do you think should happen on International Women's Day or Women's Month?
Such a good question. So when we talk about that corporatized thing, I think there would be a lot of religious people who fervently believe in, Christmas being a time to reflect, that would see consumerism as offensive, right? They would look at that and go, this is not what Christmas is about. Same with Valentine's Day, same with Easter, same with everything. They all go, oh, we've lost the meaning. I think that's what's happened to International Women's Day. I think we have commercialized it. And it's only in the last few years, like I probably did this before that I've realized that those challenges, those lovely hashtags, they are not the official ones. They are from a .com.au and it's a corporatized version. Now, I'm not saying the slogans they choose are bad. I'm saying they don't get to choose. Yeah. The UN Women's Group gets to choose. And so when people come out this year's theme, it's the success of marketing. I don't know what's wrong with us as human beings. That we fall for this marketing all the time. And that's the thing. It's so effective because choose to challenge is a really lovely, neat hashtag. Women in leadership for a post-COVID world is not a nice, neat hashtag. But it's just our need for sound bites and marketing and our acceptance of surface level stuff.
Yes.
I don't really get angry at the women who use those, right? I'm not angry when I see a woman or a man hashtag choose to challenge. All I go is,
that's me. I've been hashtagging that.
I don't look at that and go oh, you fool.
Yeah.
What I do, I get pissed off when companies use it because I'm like, you should know better, and you've got social media budgets and people who should be researching this stuff, and how dare you hijack what this is meant to be for your corporate image and your branding. What I feel is a misery for us as humans that we are so susceptible to marketing, because that is what it is. And telling someone choose to challenge, I'm going to swear now, Dawn, you can edit me out. Fuck you, mate. Whoever came up with that, unless you say white man in privileged position choose to challenge, you failed. I'm sorry, because women have been challenging for centuries. That is not working. We know that's not working. Yeah. You don't need to market to the women, which is what basically the marketing does. We need to be marketing to middle-aged white men. And I don't believe shame's effective. And it's not an effective marketing tool. So we don't actually put the hard word on them. Yes. So all that commercialized stuff doesn't do what it should do, in my opinion. And I think it robs the day of meaning. So this is the first time in my life that I've really commiserated with religious people who get pissed off about Christmas being commercial. Yeah. Because I've always been oh, whatever. And maybe there will be people who hear that and go, oh, yeah, whatever. That is the thing I take offense at. I dislike that it's one day. I dislike that it's like this, hey, we did it. We've done our thing. It's all about breakfasts. You took the money that you spent on the social media campaign and the social events and paid some women some more money instead, you'd have a bigger impact and it would last longer. It's just a flash in the pan, but everybody does it because you can't be seen to be missing out. I would really respect a company that said, hey, we had $1 million set aside for our social media and for our breakfast, but instead we're going to give every woman in the company an extra $2,000 pay rise. That would be impressive, but people don't do that because it doesn't make good photos. It doesn't get you social media reach. And that's where I get really annoyed. We're our own worst enemy. Human society is our own worst enemy there.
I think when you see International Women's Day happening on one level, I think, or at least they're thinking about it, right? But then, like you're talking about, the other level to it is, why is it being done? If the reason you're doing it is to tick a diversity box or to say that, oh, we care, but you're not actually backing up the actions to it, I think that is a very good point, because after your article, even on this podcast, I've gone, one of the themes of International Women's Day, I say one of the themes, not the theme, is choose to challenge. But what that is also saying is that, you're asking again a woman to do the heavy lifting. I honestly feel, as a financial advisor, that the external change is not going to happen. I mean, that's how I feel about it. So I kind of go, you as a woman cannot afford to sleepwalk your way through finances, because really the system doesn't care about how you're going to end up. By the time you've done all your free caring duties, by the time you looked after everyone else, if you end up homeless and in poverty, the system is not going to care. It's not going to care. No matter how many breakfasts you attend right now, the system is not going to change to do that. So I see where you're coming from. So if we can somehow, if we've got anyone that is listening here that maybe is working for a large company, I suppose, what could you share, a message to take back to the corporate? So you have mentioned, use that budgeting on, giving rises, pay rises and things like that. What kind of real action can companies take?
This is an answer that has a myriad of options. Depends on the company, depends on your budget.
Yes.
There's things that I would ask big businesses to do versus small businesses.
Yes.
Look, there's a few things that I feel very strongly make a quick impact.
Okay.
These come from, first of all, I saw Lieutenant Morrison, the guy that used to be, like, he was, Tony Abbott appointed him to be in charge of women's stuff, and everybody went, what?
Yeah.
He's amazing. And what he realized in his process, and he spoke about it at a conference I went to, which really opened my eyes, is he said, it's not the woman's job to go in and convince the men, it was my job.
Yes.
So he, as the middle-aged white man in charge, he went to the platoons of men. He went in there and explained why. And his one thing was, I don't want you to die, and your team will be more capable if you have women in it. Like, it is a fact. If I can get, for all the questions about women's ability to serve and in pressure situation, he's like, I know there's a better chance you'll have a higher capability if there's diversity. But he didn't ask a woman to do it. He didn't ask his, because he had one of his, I think it was his chief of staff, is a trans woman. Mm-hmm. Like, how extraordinary is that?
That's amazing.
Yes, like, I saw an article where at the head of the ADF came out telling women to stop being attractive. Like, that is unconscionable. That man is condoning the behavior of the men that have committed sexual assault. That is what he has done. He probably doesn't see it that way, but dude, you did. By saying those words and putting the onus on us, it is not a woman's job to go out and convince that. So if you're a white man in charge of a company, you are the one going out every day to explain why we need diversity in our teams, why we need to recruit more women into our teams, why that is going to help you have a better profitable company, have a safer life. That's not the job of women. We're not in enough powerful positions to do it.
Correct.
And what I have seen over the International Women's Day's breakfast, and I went to one, there was an excellent breakfast by the Bankwest Curtin Economic Centre, sharing the Indigenous changes that had happened. And what they'd shown is how Indigenous lifespan for men had increased, but for women it had stayed the same. And I looked around the room and there was one friggin' CEO in there, one male CEO. It was just awash with women and male researchers. Graham Kerr from South 32 gets my like to be ballsy enough to go sit in that and to be really uncomfortable and to hear how far you have to go. And he was the only guy. And we have like CEOs for change. We have all of that stuff. Where the hell are you? I want those men. That's what the International Women's Day breakfast should be. It should be at least half male. Stop sending your women and go yourself and like own up to what's happening and get serious. Use that, that energy that you talk about, that you get from those things, and that acknowledgement, those kinds of events can be used much more powerfully. So that's the two things, I guess, for relation to International Women's Day. The final thing is pay your fucking women what they deserve. If you have not done a gender gap analysis at every level in your company, you have failed. Pull your finger out and turn around to old Angus in charge of the Defence Force and tell him he's wrong. It's not me saying that or you saying that, doesn't matter. Every white man in this country had better be turning around and going to Angus and saying, you cocked up, mate, and you need to do better.
Yeah.
We can't do that. So you can see how angry I get about this, don't you?
No, it's not angry. Everything is like making sense, right? Like saying like you get to say the things that I cannot articulate out loud. I see that call, and the sad thing is that most of the people probably listening to this podcast will be women, so not probably the guys that need to
well,
hear
in that case, ladies, you can tell them I told you to do it. It's not my fault. You send this to your bosses, you send it to the white men, and you say, if you're serious about International Women's Day, take a good hard look in the mirror, and you need to come to defense here. You need to be at these things. Just say that I made you do it.
So listeners, you've got permission from Lacey, but you're right. I mean, but because even in your article, you mentioned something that that was similar to what Mariam Mohammed actually she posted on LinkedIn about the fact that it's bad enough you don't pay women, but you even don't want to pay them on International Women's Day when you're asking small businesses to speak. And I was like laughing because you've mentioned it, she's mentioned it. She doesn't mince her words, So she's of course a brown woman who is so outspoken. But Lacey, can you explain the absurdity behind that?
It is, isn't it? It is absurd. Imagine having a day to empower women and then saying, oh, well, we hoped you'd speak for free for exposure. Now, this is again where marketing and people in charge of social media and PR have something to answer for, and that's a lot of women. Mm-hmm. And it is also a cultural change we've had here too. Remember, like in the 90s and 2000s, it was normal for you to speak for free to then sell someone your product. And that was like a legitimate way for people to build their businesses. Like, I'll come and talk for free, but can I plug my book? That kind of thing. What we know is that women earn less on average. We have lower superannuation. We are a decent portion of small business in Australia because of the flexibility that running your own business offers, right? Because it allows us to build around childcare and caring responsibilities, all that kind of stuff. But because we're paid less, when you ask a woman on the day to celebrate women to speak for free, and I mean it for any time of year. So that request came through to me last year. So not for International Women's Day, but the fact that it was a major bank wanting me to share my intellectual property, which is how I make money, but to do it for free for exposure, like that bank is dead to me. Okay. I have an account with them. I will be moving. Okay. That's how seriously, and I'm not going to say their name on the podcast, but if you want to know who they are, I'll tell you who they are, because they deserve to be outed. It's only respect for the two individuals that I know that is stopping me from naming them, to be blunt. Okay. It's not any risk of defamation. I couldn't care less because I'm using fact. It's just respect for those two people. I don't want them to be embarrassed, and I don't want them to be penalised in their career. And one of them's a woman and one's a man. But if you do this, anyone who does this, if you have a practice of asking people to speak for free, and look, that's okay when someone is an employee and they're representing their company, so they're getting paid anyway, they're taking a day off work. It's okay when it's a requisite of their job. There's lots of circumstances where it's okay to ask someone to work for free. It is not okay to ask a small business to work for free for you if you're a big company, ever. Stop, and especially not on International Women's Day. But I think, Ivy Chen, who's a fantastic board director in Perth with a mining background, put it really well. She said, it's not the job of small business to subsidise you. You have enough money. You do. Don't be greedy, you bastards. That's what it is. It's greed and laziness. And it's like, oh, well, we can get away with it because we've got this fantastic network. Those days are gone, mate. Like, they are gone. I think there's a bit of unawareness there as well, Lacey. Like, I think, even they just might be so ignorant of what they're asking you. They're just so unaware, painfully unaware of the situation. I think sometimes it's not even something malicious. It's the fact that not at all.
There's two different realities. They've got their reality world of where there's budgets and budget, because we know how much there'll be budgets for marketing and stuff we know those things, but it's a very different world from the small business that is that needs to make every dollar count, because that's you, that's your business. So I think there's this this real misunderstanding or ignorance, or maybe being not really in tune to what's going on to someone else's situation.
Exactly. And you're exactly right that it is ignorance. And I do like that phrase, never ascribe to malice what can be explained by ignorance.
Yep.
So don't assume someone's doing this maliciously. But for that reason, I will be very quick to point out when they've done it. And like in the case of this particular lady who asked me, she was like, I'm sorry, I've offended you. Wow. Like she honestly had no idea. And she's a lifetime employee. When you have your income coming, and like she's spoken for free on a panel that I was on. So she's probably going, what are you talking about? But there's a nuance there that's different. She's an employee. They're trying to recruit more women. Of course, she's going to go for free on a panel to a women in technology group. That's free recruiting for her. Also a panel where she doesn't have to rehearse. She's not giving away intellectual property. It's totally different from asking me to deliver training. She didn't see it. She just was like, well, that's what they want. What I want is women or men in that situation to go, wow. Like I think about, there's so many times when I've done things wrong, and you've heard later, like dead naming people. I've dead named trans people before, not knowing that that's a thing.
So what's dead naming?
Dead name is when you use someone who has come out and announced, you know, they're born one sex and have announced that that's not their sex and they've changed. And so, you know, a trans woman they're a woman, right? You don't call them by the name they had when they weren't a woman. So you know, the example that gets used is Ellen Page. Mm-hmm. So Ellen Page is her birth name.
Yes.
That's not her name now. To call her Ellen Page is an insult. We should call her Elliot Page because that's the name she's chosen. It's easy to fall into. I didn't know that dead naming was a bad thing until this year. I was like, oh wow, you know, like it's unconscious incompetence. That's the way I think about it. Once you know better, you can do better. You've got to be open to knowing where you did the wrong thing. Now, there's a balance to this, which is it's very hard to keep track of who I could offend. And it can make you scared to say anything in case you do upset someone. I think almost everybody will accept that if you're coming from the right place and you'll listen when someone says, hey, that's not okay, then you're not going to be shot. Yes. You're not going to be cancelled. You know, like if you're willing to have the discussion, I think that's enough. So I think if more people who hear those kinds of requests and then someone does get irate goes, oh, wow, what happened here? I don't understand, and acknowledges that, hey, maybe there is something that I've misunderstood here. That's the only way you're going to really move forward with this stuff. You know, like if we just try to hide it or ignore it, you know, like that's not helping anybody. Anyway, hope that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. And I think you need to be open when you kind of go, oh, I didn't know that. But I think you've got two reactions. You've got oh, I didn't know that. Okay, let me change the way I'm going to approach that the next time because I understand where you're coming from. And I'm in financial planning. As you can imagine, my industry can be quite interesting when you're at social events. And sometimes people drink a little bit and then they tell you how they really feel about things. Right. And so this demographic that you're telling us that we should be talking to about them making the change, you know, telling them that they should be the ones making the challenging change, not us women. They've kind of expressed, you know, why do we have to make changes for a minority? Why is there cancel culture? Why do we have to change things just because some people are upset? You know, I'm offended that they're offended. So these are things.
Yeah.
I've had to, I know, I kind of like, I'm thinking this is why sometimes social events are not good for me.
It's a thing though, right?
Yeah.
There are things that I've seen. There was one recently where someone had erroneously, because it was good clickbait, created the headline, nurses have asked people to call breast milk chest milk. Like I did look at that and just go, oh my God, really?
Yeah.
Like, is this where we're at? So I can understand the frustration. Now, it turned out that was absolute total BS, beat up by the media. And I would expect that a lot of the outrage might actually be media beat ups to get clicks. So I wonder if it's as extreme or as vocal. That said, we know we've got a history of doing this to people. We know we've got a history of inadvertently, but sometimes also on purpose, just treating them badly. It's just a thing, like, and it's only in recent years that people, I guess, have had more opportunities to get their voice out there because with social media, you don't need to have a following. You don't need to be at a meeting table. You can post your views. And so there's more views coming out, right? What I would say to anyone who's like, well, I'm offended that they're offended, like, why? Why is it a problem? I mean, just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right. Like just because I'm offended that men don't do enough on International Women's Day on average doesn't mean I'm right. It's my opinion, right? And we're all allowed to have different opinions. I think that's what you remember when we did money debate. Have to have room for multiple views to coexist, even if you don't agree with them. But that doesn't mean I can't have empathy for you. See where you're coming from. I don't have to think you're right. So I think anyone who says that, I'd be like, well, who cares? Like, you don't have to agree with them. But the fact that they've said something means there's a problem, and you should probably give them the respect of being listened to. And, that's, I think, the thing to do there. I think the other thing is this unconsciousness of privilege. Like it's happened to me,
Yes.
where I complain. Last year I wrote, so I write something about International Women's Day every year. So that was my women's agenda. And then the year before it was, I said, men, where are you? Why are you not in these rooms? Like the same with, I used Graham Kerr's example and sent him a love letter being like, you're amazing. I always write. And then a Black woman in the United States wrote a comment of like, well, you should be giving up your speaking spots for minorities, for brown women and for Black women. And I was kind of like, yeah, I probably should actually. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I was like, oh, yeah. And I hadn't thought of that. Like when someone brings that stuff up, they're not necessarily trying to punish you. They're trying to, get you to think about it in a different way. One very interesting story, I think, also to reflect on with that is what's happened to people through the Black Lives Movement and through equality for gay marriage. The amount of post-traumatic stress that has been inflicted on the founders of those movements. People have taken their own lives. People have been unable to work. You talk to the people who campaigned for gay marriage in Australia, and they are emotional wrecks, a lot of them, because we were so unable to listen to them compassionately. And I don't want to be that as a humanity. Like I don't want to be that as a member of society. And I'm pretty sure they wouldn't too if they realized how much toll it was taking on people. So I would encourage them to think, hey, look, can you make it easy for this person to at least get their views out there? Instead of traumatizing them in the process and arguing with them and trolling them. Like, I don't know. What kind of person do you want to be?
You're giving up so little of your space to make someone else feel included. If you're saying, like, really in the scheme of things, is it worth getting upset over that? Because really there are more important things to be getting upset on. I think that's when you've got a scale. Yeah, when you've got a scale of things to be offended and all that. I like to keep my offense to myself. And it was quite interesting that so Lisa, I'm not sure if you actually are aware of this, but I heard about how there's some businesses that actually hire Asians or like minority groups, not because of multiculturalism, but because they feel that they'll be more, how would I put it? Like, they're not going to talk back and they'll be just there working.
God.
Yeah. And I'm just like, wow, on the outside, you kind of go, that's a really multicultural company. But then when you drill down to it, it's like, no, we're going to try and have a sweatshop here, kind of, right?
Oh, Gina Reinhardt. Do you remember Gina Reinhardt going, you Aussies are lazy, you all need to work for $2 a day. That's why I can't produce this.
Yeah. So there's that sort of this weird thing where you're moving in a space, and you talked about, you understand your privilege and things like that. Like for me, moving to a corporate space, I could actually see who was using me as a diversity checker box. And who was genuinely supporting me because they were not actually concerned about how this exterior looked. It was really about the work that I put in. And I think it's sometimes a bit sad because the ones that tick the box, or they know how to strategize around ticking the boxes, actually move quite quickly. They move quite quickly in the environment. But what they don't realize is that, I see it. I see your intentions. I may not say anything about it, but I see it. So like how you've looked around in a room and gone, where are these people? for what you've almost like got a mental checklist. Like I've got a list in my head of who the real advocates are. My job as a woman is to celebrate those people as well, because I think they're great examples of people that should be calling out the stuff that is not right, but they just exist going, you're a human being. Let's just give you a fair go.
It's really tough on that one, Dawn.
Yeah.
It's really tough. So part of me, I should also say, I think there are two kinds of ways to think about this change. One is process and one is outcome.
Yep.
And part of me goes, well, if they're hiring them, they're going to end up promoting them. We're going to get there anyway. And how about you just stage a coup from the inside? So I kind of go, yeah, you're recruiting for the wrong reasons, but watch out. You just let the fox in the hen house.
Correct.
Part of me is a bit like, well, you're going to get what's coming to you because, and yeah, it's a shit process the way you've gotten there.
Yeah.
But at least it might have a flow-on effect. It's amazing. You send me the names of those companies because I will be black banning them.
No.
There's a really tough thing here. Now, I'm going to share a bit about when we recruited for money debate speakers. When we went out to look for money debate speakers, we knew, we've probably got about, 25 speaker spots. I was like, right, we are placing brown and black and Indigenous women first.
Okay.
Then we're placing white women, and then we will go out and ask white men. So the white men got the invite like a week before, and it was a very deliberate, no, this is the first round we're going to. Like that is how I now approach conferences and stuff. Like we are placing those women first where they want to go in the times that suit them, and everyone else can fit around.
Oh, wow.
Well, the point with this is not that I went out going, well, you tick a box. It's that I believe there are so many capable people who could do the job. There are so many capable people, like I am eminently replaceable by about 50 other people, right? Like as much as I think I'm wonderful, I'm not irreplaceable. And there's so many people who can do it. So if you say, well, let's say there's 50 people who can do those 25 speaking spots, right? We're going to preference these ones first. We're going to offer it. If they say no, fine. Okay. Like that's okay. Now, we didn't do as well as I hoped. We had out of our 40 something speakers, we had 13 who you'd consider minorities beyond the fact that we were mostly women. We didn't get enough Indigenous people. We didn't get disability representation. There were things that I was like, and we had very low LGBTQ. So I was like, look, we haven't done very well, but I just see it as a work in progress. I think everybody needs to do, if you're going to organize things like that, and I'm talking about speaking gigs, but it'd be the same with jobs as you go, no, we've just got to put those people to the front because they meet the minimum threshold. Let's give them the shot first. If that doesn't work out, right, then we move down the list. But that's certainly how I would, I think you can make that impact quite quickly.
I see what you're saying because I didn't know that was your process. I took part as one of the debaters, so I was quite happy to just, because I understand the importance of visibility. Like I will be visible where I have to be visible because I want more people to know that there are people like me that exist. You're welcome to the table. You're welcome in financial planning. You're welcome to the financial conversation. It's not just one way of dealing with things. One thing that kind of flowed on from what you're talking about is that you put preferences that are there. Something that's quite divisive between women, because this is where I think brainwashing has happened. You talked about International Women's Day brainwashing. I think when we're talking about quotas, women are made to feel that they're not good enough when they get into the role because apparently they just got it as a woman. When nobody questions when a man has gotten a job because maybe they've known somebody and they play in the same golf club, or there's no question when a man goes into a job about whether they deserve it. But the moment a woman's in a job, is a spotlight on them. And I've even kind of heard other women kind of whisper, oh, yeah, she's, like we're so harsh on a woman who ends up in a prominent position. We're not quick enough to support her. We make her feel bad that, she's gotten a job because she's just part of a ticker box. I mean, how do you feel about that? That for me makes me really angry. So that's where a lot of my angst comes from, is that
why are we feel angry? Yeah. Because it is insulting in some ways. However, I guess this is that debate between quotas, right? Like and people oscillate on it. My point is we've tried without quotas and we ain't getting there quick enough.
Exactly.
Now, I'm coming back to your discussion about we're just going to hire a bunch of sweatshop workers in Australia. People who don't talk back to us because I'm really sick of you guys complaining and just pay you $2 a day.
Yeah.
I go, that's fine. I'm coming to you from the inside then. I kind of think, what comes first? So you either have the quota, you get enough women on there, you change the culture by density, and it evolves, right? And then you get that outcome, or you let it happen on merit, which is a complete myth.
Correct.
I think you have to have the quota first, because guys, you didn't do it quick enough. If quotas are coming, it's because you didn't do it. And it is you. It is you guys who are tapping your mates on the shoulder for the board positions and all of that stuff. You know, this is a failure of yours, and now quotas are what you deserve. That's how I feel about it.
Well, yeah,
I sound like an asshole. I sound like a patronizing parent in a lot of ways. But I do feel like if we can get enough women in there, then as annoying as the quota was, eventually you won't need it anymore, because the culture will be substantially changed, you know. And I think about Graham Kerr, the guy, I'm using him as a great example, the guy who came to that, the one CEO out of the CEOs for Change, and I know the rest of you, and I know who wasn't there, and you should be frigging embarrassed. Graham sat there. His team, his leadership team, is half male, half female. 4 women, 4 men. There's not another mining company who's got there yet that I'm aware of. If he can do it, so can you. Now, what came first? Was it that leadership's team decision? Because they don't have a quota. They do have like a positive hiring policy of trying to promote women, and there's lots of women in leadership. I think back to when I worked for Western Mining, you know, the old cowboys, and I was there was 300 people on the site. So that difference, when I think about what I've had going to the Kalgoorlie nickel smelter as a 21-year-old, you know, with Western Mining versus what I see at South 32, I don't know which came first. Graham managed it without quotas, but he's the only friggin' one. Okay. I think there's something special about Graham. I don't think it's, it'll happen eventually when we have the right women. I think it's Graham and his leadership team. I think it's Rowena Smith. I think it's that team is just exceptional at that stuff. Unless you copy what they have done, we will make you. That's the way I think about it. And I guess I'm sick of waiting for permission. If you don't sort it out soon, we're just going to do it without you. And part of the point to amassing wealth is to become a strong enough shareholder that we can really do you damage if you don't. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, and I find like that what you said there about it's a myth that you know, there is an even playing field, because it's not. So I think that's what I want to clarify as well. If you break it down, you go, oh, I just want to get the job because it's fair. It's like, first of all, you're looking at a whole criteria that's not fair to women, because they might be penalized for having time out for looking after kids. Or, you know, the code term that I hear is, oh, we're looking for someone more experienced, you know, then like, why put you in the pool, you know? Code term sometimes for women is the experience bit, because that's something maybe we cannot compete in, because we might have to take time off.
And there's so much to this. This is such a complicated thing. And one great area for research for this is to look up Professor Robert Wood, who is at the University of Technology of Sydney. And he explains how it's nothing to do, well, the career breaks don't help, but it starts from the first job, where they gave the boy the more strategic operational stuff and they give the girl the more administrative hit.
Correct.
So an engineer would come in, and I use the example of, as an engineer, like, who had been on site for, 10 months, I think, on a shift with 40 blokes, running the furnace chemistry with them. No problems at all. Like, they were all great. I didn't have any problems with anyone to my face doing anything. When the GM lost his 5th secretary in 18 months, which tells you something, right?
Yes.
They asked me to go in to be temporarily while they could recruit someone, because they needed someone really quickly. And I looked around and went, there are 5 fucking blokes that I'm working with. We can all operate a computer. Why me? Why have you picked me? Knowing I'm a woman, right? Which is, of course, my boss, to his credit, said, yeah, I know, but I promise you're going to learn something. And what happened was I got to be the secretary while the BHP takeover was being planned. So I got, as a 21-year-old, to go into war rooms to see how you sell a company. To help see how they spun things, like changing stats to like vending graphs. I got to sit there while they worked out how to promote themselves. And like, as a 21-year-old, I went, holy guacamole, this is amazing. So I think there can be real advantages to it if you play it. And that's the thing. I now go, I am delighted if you recruit me because I'm a woman, but I'm going to say what I think and I'm going to change you whether you like it or not, because I have that advantage. But that's what happens to these women. So much of it is subconscious. It's even, hey, we're going to the pub for beers after work and the poor woman's got to go do childcare. So she misses out on that casual chat. And that's the point at which they're like, oh, hey, would you like to do that project? Oh, yeah, mate, I'd love to do it. The stuff that happens because they all ride in their Lycra bicycles and shower together. That they're tiny micro things, but they add up to this massive stuff. So I recommend looking at University of Technology of Sydney's research on that. Professor Bob Wood speaks extensively on it. Excellent research material that explains how, yes, the childcare, the maternity breaks, the superannuation gaps, those are very big things, but it's not just those big things. Probably 100 things a man will do today at work to his female colleagues and to his female employees that add up. And it's just not simple. But that's the point that he makes, is there is no meritocracy. And if you think there is one, you are deluding yourself.
Correct. So
very clear evidence on that.
And we talk about this, I suppose, like we understand this and are convinced of it. But I find sometimes when I go out to the real world, I feel like I'm the only crazy person.
Don't join me, I'm crazy too.
I know. Sometimes I find it hard because it's sometimes a conversation that women don't want to embark on as well. I mean, they talked about unconscious bias, and I know that sometimes women will place themselves in the more powerful group, mainly men. They will side with them because that's going to give them power in the workplace. That's all part of unconscious bias. So they may not necessarily be willing to work with the marginalized group because of the awareness that the power dynamics. I mean, it's understandable. You want to be able to go to work and try and equalize power wherever you can. So if that's being with people who have the power, I understand that. For me, I'm not one of those people, because I will just I will say what I think in a diplomatic way. But I think I was even told by one senior person that basically she had told me that I had to cater to male ego when I was working. The thing is that it's the truth, right? In certain environments, that's what
it's practical. It's pragmatic.
It's practical.
That's why I think about it. It's a very pragmatic approach.
Yeah.
There's a great Machiavelli quote. Probably a bit dodgy, isn't it, that I'm quoting Machiavelli? There comes that outcomes over processes as well. But it basically that when you want to change something, you will only get lukewarm support from the people who would benefit from the change. Because if they're vocal against the people who are benefiting it, like the people who are benefiting from it, which we're talking about middle-aged white men right now, of course they don't want to change. Like, they've got it pretty friggin' good. And every time someone says, oh, the poor men, I'm like, oh, give me the world's smallest violin. Yeah. Look, we've all got problems, but mate, yours are just proportionally nothing compared to what as a gender women have had to overcome and are still facing. So I don't have a lot of sympathy, sorry blokes, on average. Certainly individual circumstances.
I think that's why sometimes, I know personally, I reach out a lot to like I connect to people like you. I think if I can give any advice to listeners who maybe feel a bit isolated in their point of view because they feel they're a bit of a freedom warrior themselves, but
it's lonely.
It's a lonely pathway.
And there'll be a million women that probably go, yeah, I agree, but I can't say it. And that's the thing. If they do say it, a lot of women will be financially penalized and career penalized. It's risky to do. So it's got to be women who, like me, have lower risk by saying things like this. Like, what's the worst thing that someone can mean? Not offer me a contract. I don't need your contract. Like, stick it up your backside. Like, honestly. And I wouldn't work with some people on moral grounds now. I was able to say no to selling my company to the barefooted bit because I don't like his take on money and marriage. That is a luxury that I have. I think women who are like me, and I'm thinking about women who are on boards, who have been CEOs, like, it's our responsibility to be vocal because we are financially secure, and we cannot have people holding your job over you, and that's where I think that there's that advantage there. But just know you're not alone. If you feel that, you might feel like the only person who's a freedom warrior and it feels awkward. I get this sense that we're going to eventually reach a point where it's like, so I'm probably going to march for the first time in my life on the 14th of March when we do the Women's March for Justice. That's what this has done. It's made me an actual feminist. Like, I would never have called myself a feminist, but the behavior of our politicians is so abhorrent to me that I'm like, that's it. Enough. I suspect we will hear more and more vocal stuff. We will hear more and more men and women in just challenging, and that it will become normal, and maybe you won't feel so alone, I hope.
That's a great message. And so that march is happening on March 14th.
Yes. In Perth, yep.
In
Perth
Perth.
one, and then in 15th in everywhere else. And they're aiming to put a ring of women around Parliament House in Canberra on the 15th. And it's honestly, there's been marches before, and I've always been like, go for it. But I don't feel strongly enough. This time I'm like, Scotty from marketing and Christian Porter need a very clear message that this is not good enough and we have had enough. And I feel like that call to arms of we've had enough now, there's going to come a point where we don't ask for permission and we just do it. And you will have to live with it.
You embody so much of really what international, if you're talking about real meaning of how we're celebrating a woman and where we need to close the gaps, Lacey, I think you embody so much of that spirit, and I'm very thankful that you're using your position to be able to speak out and actually call for change very courageously and bravely. I've enjoyed talking to you so much. I think I could go on for hours. And so thank you so much for being on and sharing the insights with our listeners.
Thanks for having me. And thanks for letting me swear.
No, that's all right. I'll put a warning. That's fine.
Yeah, my filthy language. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So as we end this episode, can you just remind our listeners again about what you said the actual theme of International Women's Day, or where they can actually look for other resources that don't come up with the first Google resource that comes up?
Yeah. And of course, that's about resourcing, right? Because search engine optimization. So look for the UN, guys, with anything that's about sustainable development goals. Look for the UN. So Google for them. And I will get the quote imprecise, but it's about the 2021 theme that the UN has chosen is about women and leadership in a post-COVID world. So making sure that we thrive, because I guess a lot of people would have seen, women took a bigger hit during COVID. Yes. Like, yes, we're recovering quite well in Australia, but around the world, a lot of women have gone backwards. So they're focusing on that women in leadership. And I guess it's a bit of a cliche, but everybody's a leader. You're all a leader. Leader to your partner and your kids, or in your school community, or at your workplace, or speaking on a stage, whatever it is. Everybody can do something about that, and that includes every gender and everybody.
Everybody can do something.
Yeah, so I would encourage people to have a look there. I would also sadly encourage some healthy skepticism.
Okay.
And the same as you would with any bank trying to sell you when someone's doing something for International Women's Day and they invite you to that lunch or that lovely breakfast and give you those gifts. Ask, did you pay the speakers? Did you pay the people who provided that stuff? Do that kind of thing. Like, use a bit of healthy skepticism and don't fall for the marketing as easily. It's tiring sometimes. So don't beat yourself up if you just go, I'm just going to the brunch. Can't be the one who asks all the time.
Correct.
But, if enough of us do it, it will make an impact. So please do use your healthy skepticism effectively to ask questions and really test things, especially if you are in a position of power in your company. So middle-aged white blokes, I'm looking at you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining our Circle of Stories. Subscribe for new episodes. Let's change how the story ends.